here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of Stephen Kent, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry and all that other groovy stuff. Has had a lifetime in music, including various bands, including Furious Pig, Lights in a Fat City, and also worked with various other people to create Trance, and has collaborated with a lot of other musical bands and musicians over the decades. So this is the interview, and you're going to find out everything you wanted to know about Stephen and much more. So after several minutes of interest and casual chat, we get down to the early formative years. Stephen, it's over to you.
Born in Britain, in Chippenham, Wiltshire, just around the corner from where Peter Gabriel now has for a long time been established. And when I was a very small baby, my family emigrated to Uganda, where my father had a job teaching at the Makerere University in Kampala. And so my musical awakenings came initially, although I wasn't that aware of it, through being in Africa, I think, because there were monthly full moon drumming ceremonies which would go on in very close proximity to where I lived, which I don't have a strong memory of, but I feel infiltrated my consciousness. And then growing up in Devon, around Dartington College of the Arts in South Devon, I was exposed to a lot of music, especially classical music, which was what my parents loved, but also different kinds of world musics. And it became an interest for me even in my early teens, the music from different cultures, also informed by having lived in Africa as a young child. I was kind of aware already there was a world out there that interested me.
Yes, my God, that's amazing. Did you have any brothers or sisters?
I got three siblings. I'm the eldest of four. My brother Martin, now known as Mart Pig, also had a record on Rough Trade and is still in the music world. My two sisters are working in different fields.
Right, nice. There you go. So you were the eldest of the tribe then, actually.
Uh-huh.
And obviously your mother was quite musical. Was your father also culturally quite tuned in and excited with going over to Africa to teach at the university or Kenya?
Well, he was born there.
Right.
My father was born in Uganda himself. My grandmother, his mother, having been a doctor on a mission station in southwest Kenya. We're talking about the 1920s, post World War I into the 1930s. And so my father was a big protagonist in bringing our family out into tribal indigenous regions around East Africa when I was very, very small. Because he was interested in bringing, as an art professor, he was interested in bringing native cultures to bear on the work he was doing at the university in Makerere. So, my early childhood till I was about 7 was very much in what I now look back on as a very rarefied kind of cultural experience. Of course, at the time you just don't understand how affected you might be from your early childhood life.
Yes.
And we moved back to Devon when I was about 7, and still, as I say, my father was the visual artist, a sculptor and a ceramicist, and a teacher, above all a teacher. And my mother played music, and between them, they were both very Christian, and they pulled me into church activities, which also had musical elements that were significant. But so I was, kind of grew up in those environments, And in my early teens, started to break out and started to play guitar and listen to rock music. Jethro Tull was my first rock concert.
Right. This
With
was
Thick
this
as a
the
Brick.
Thick as a Brick. This was the early 70s at this point.
Yeah, early 70s in my, when I hit 12, 13 years old. And there was a cool teacher at our school who took me into, took a class of us to see Jethro Tull. And then, that was successful. And we saw other bands with the same group of teachers, of kind of switched on teachers.
They were very switched on, weren't they? That is extraordinary, actually. I did remember
Yeah.
talking to a guy called Chris Tofu, who was in the Tofu Love Frogs, and his RE teacher took them to Glastonbury in the mid-80s.
Oh,
And
God.
yes, that was quite something, wasn't it, really? But
Yeah.
I didn't realise teachers, they might have taken us to the Panto or some such thing, but to see rock bands, especially,
Yeah.
I'm just amazed that health and safety went right out the window because people were smoking and dope was in the air and loud music. I mean, it was all very, it wasn't like Kumbaya my world, was it?
No, not at all. It was radical, and we loved it. I loved it, and I'm the oldest, as I said, of my siblings. But friends of mine had older siblings who were very influential on the listening habits of their younger siblings and friends, and so, I started to listen to all kinds of, at that time, rock music, and then the punk thing happened. When I was in my later mid-teens, we were already playing with the band Furious Pig, who'd had
Right.
various influences from, a lot of Californian bands like Captain Beefheart and The Doors, and Frank Zappa was a huge influence on our evolution as listening musicians. But then when the punk new wave world hit, we were instantly transformed. We'd listened a lot to John Peel. We used to listen a
Right.
great deal to John Peel's show, and saw a lot of bands from that that early punk era. We
Yes.
opened as Furious Pig. We opened a show for the Slits at in Plymouth. And we were kind of tuned into the punk thing. I would drive down to Plymouth on my Vespa scooter to meet a girlfriend and go to see any number of bands. Like I think it might have been 77, but I think it more likely was 78 when Talking Heads and the Ramones toured England for the first time. And I
Yes.
went thinking I was going to see the Ramones and came away with I loved the Ramones, but Talking Heads in the early incarnation of the band and the first 5 years of the 1980s and the late 70s were really a huge influence in my consciousness.
Yes, but from your background, though, with your sort of love of classical music and sort of influenced by your parents and the church, was it difficult or was it kind of just exciting to be rebellious? Or did you get pressure from your parents who were like, oh,
No. They were very open. I mean, again, I was the first child, so I was probably a bit of an experiment in some ways for them. But, they were in the art world, the contemporary art world, and my father was teaching art students who were far more probably wilder than I appeared to be. I was up to a lot of things my parents had no idea about, as I imagine many kids are, even my own. And I was a French horn player to start with, so I was playing orchestral and chamber music on the one hand, and then I was playing guitar, and I saved up to buy my first electric guitar, and we had band projects which my parents also supported. We rehearsed in our living room and in the living rooms or garages of other members of the band. So it was all, the creative spark was encouraged.
it was going, wasn't it? When you got to 18 then, did you do your A levels and were almost going
Yeah.
on? So did you then go
Yeah.
to university from that point?
I was going to. I had a place at Middlesex Polytechnic in North London where I was going to study performing arts with
Right.
a specialisation as music. But Furious Pig, at that time, we entered the Melody Maker Rock Folk Competition for the second time. We'd been in it once before and didn't get anywhere. But the second time, I think it was 78, we ended up going through all of the different stages of the Melody Maker Rock Folk Competition, and we got to the final, which was, we at that point we were, we were playing kind of angular, jangly music that definitely had a Captain Beefheart and the Magic Band vibe to it, but was also inspired by the new wave time that we were in. We were vastly different from all the other bands who came through that process. And Bob Geldof was one of the judges of the competition. We played our set early in the Roundhouse. The final was in the Roundhouse. So it was Bob Geldof, Ray Coleman, who at the time was the Melody Makers managing editor, and Justin Hayward
Of the Moody Blues.
Of the Moody Blues. And Bob Geldof really liked what we did. He said to us, "Oh, you've got a lot of bottle," or what in his more Irish accent, about what we did. But there was no possibility we were going to win that competition. At the time, it was won by a group who sounded like the Eagles, and their name was The Losers. So that just seemed appropriate. But we got the sense, the understanding that far from just being some group where we were in this little pool in southwest England playing music and doing our strange directions in contemporary music, that actually there was a place for us in the bigger world, and we ended up moving to London and squatting in King's Cross to start with, and then basically all around North London for several years while we performed, and we connected through Graham Lewis and Bruce Gilbert of Wire to the Rough Trade connection. Right. And then we were kind of in the fold of Rough Trade and being encouraged by our connections to the London scene through that to push ourselves further forward with our music.
Yes. So what came first, your John Peel session or your album? Because you did a John Peel session in...
Yeah, we did. The John Peel session came first. John Walters, who was his producer, saw us play a show in the Clarendon in Hammersmith with This Heat headlining and the Young Marble Giants.
Wow.
And we did, it was absolutely jammed. It was a fantastic show, and there was a triple bill there. And John Walters was at that show and just was blown away and got us on to the Peel show within short order. And the session we did was produced by Buffin from Mott the Hoople. So that was super cool. We were very jazzed by it. But then Bruce Gilbert and Graham Lewis were the ones who went to Rough Trade and said this absolutely should be documented, and they persuaded Jeff Travis to leap in and give us a contract for that one recording. Unfortunately, that's the only Furious Pig recording that ever came out, apart from the C81 moment on the NME.
Right, God, that's amazing, isn't it? That's so then, did you do quite a bit of touring at that stage? Were you sort of going around the art centres and other little alternative venues around, the UK?
We were playing around the UK a bunch. We were also, we played with the Fall, we played with the Raincoats, the Slits, the Au Pairs, we did the ICA Rock Week maybe twice, I'm not sure. We were always kind of being invited into the scene. We did a special for Granada TV where we bumped shoulders with Split Ends, who were also in the studios doing something at the same time. But we also made a connection through, it was a Devon connection with the people who began the comic strip in London, which was in the Raymond's Review Bar in Soho.
Right.
And
so that was that Peter
that
Richardson?
that was Rick Mayall and Aid Edmondson and the French and Saunders, people who became like superstars on the British comedy circuit a couple of years later. They invited us in to the comic strip to do our vocal thing, because they had musical acts who came in and did short interspersed with the comedy that they had put on. So we've fitted well into all kinds of different scenes, and we did a bit of touring with the comic strip, as well as doing our work with, that I've just described. I remember one gig opening for Depeche Mode at the Lyceum.
Classic.
And with Subway Sect, with Perubu. We played all over the place, really, and especially in London.
Yeah, so your late teens and early 20s was quite an exciting experience, really, wasn't it?
It was phenomenal. But it was also challenging for me, I have to say, and probably for all of us as the band, because we'd all grown up together in Devon, and then we came to London and we were getting a fair amount of attention and we were moving our music forward. And we were very, very insular in some ways. We were very committed to working with our musical compositions and our work, where we would rehearse for 8 hours a day, all night long. For a while, we used to go into the Little Bit Ritzy cinema in Brixton when they shut down at the end of the night, and we would rehearse from like 11 p.m. or midnight until 8 a.m. the next morning, or 7 a.m. the next morning, and then take the tube back to our squat in Kilburn.
Right.
So we were kind of very, very charged with our own work and our own identity. And after years and years of working together, I think for me, in a way, I just got to a point where I was saturated with that and needed to open new doors.
Yes.
And I got...
I was going to say, during that period, the early 80s was quite an odd period as well, wasn't it? The early years of Thatcherism and the Falklands and the miners' strike, and then we had Greenham Common. So, and there was a massive amount of unemployment. So you were squatting, but a lot of people were just claiming the dole and, were able to get sort of various benefits, didn't they, at that point, the Job Seekers Allowance and Enterprise Allowance schemes. So it gave people...
Well, we also did. It was like... I suppose, just to go back, I would have gone on to university, but this whole scene that I've just described swept me off my feet, and I decided I was already doing what I had wanted to go and study, basically.
Yes.
So I deferred any higher education. And we were squatting and we were on the dole because that was the grant that we were getting in order to maintain our musical direction. And if I think back into what were we being paid for those gigs, I'm sure it was a relative pittance that we were being paid to play wherever we played. It was we were so enthusiastic and taken with the whole scene. The money thing wasn't really on our radar. It wasn't, but survival was.
Yes, and actually a little bit of money always seemed quite a lot, really.
Money was always great, but we got used to getting by on very little.
Yes, we jumble cells, the Army and Navy
The
second-hand
circus
places.
stalls, yeah.
All those classics, and living off, is it textured vegetable protein, TVP, and tins of tomatoes and all that kind of
We
world.
we made like vegetables and rice was a standard that we had on a little camping stove we had in at least one of the squats where we didn't even have electricity, and sometimes we didn't have gas either, or even water in one case. But we were doing it in the right way. A lot of the squatting movement from the early 80s moved into housing associations, which became more organized and got a better deal on better properties through interacting with local
Yes.
councils.
Which is, it's quite interesting, that, isn't it? Did you ever come across an artist who used to melt a block of ice? The ice, I think, whether he was called the Iceman. But I've just asked because I did an interview with him a few years ago because it was quite curious. And there's a film that has just come out about him, which I haven't seen yet, but it sounds very interesting, very niche.
No.
But there was a guy called Malcolm Hardy who was kind of in that alternative comedy world as
Okay.
well. And there was a
Malcolm Hardy or Jeremy Hardy?
Malcolm. He was one of those characters who a lot of people on that alternative comedy. There was another guy called Arthur Smith and people who were like Charlie Hicks, and I think they were all a bit of a scene as well. Terry Edwards.
I don't know those names. I did become a much bigger part of the alternative comedy cabaret scene when I came back from Australia, from my first trip to Australia, which happened, directly, almost within 6 months of the Furious Pig record coming out. I became involved with the circus from Australia, Circus Oz.
Oh, so the band split 81 then, Furious Pig, and then
I left.
I
left. We didn't really split. In a way, you could say I split the band by leaving, but we got to a point where we were, like I was describing, it was something had to give because we'd been so intensely involved with each other and with our own thing since we were in our early mid-teens. And now here we were in our early 20s, 7, 8 years later, and other muscles started to flex, and I basically got invited to go to Australia with Circus Oz, whom we met on a tour that Furious Pig did in the Netherlands in late 1980, and Circus Oz invited me to go back to Australia with them in just after Charles and Diana had got married.
Right.
That was sort of like a week or two before I went to Australia, and I became music director of Circus Oz, who were and are Australia's national contemporary circus. And so that was a whole new beginning for me, and I kind of airlifted myself out, or was airlifted out of the whole London scene at that time, and disappeared for over 2 years while I worked in this completely different field in Australia.
Yes.
In a big top, and went around the country there doing some of the major festivals and working in regional touring, and also became introduced to the Didjeridu, crucially.
Right,
and
absolutely.
to Aboriginal culture. So it was like a big journey, a big kind of step into another world for me.
Yeah. How did you find yourself getting to Australia and then being part of Circus? Oh, you said you were in Holland. And
we met them they were in Rotterdam, and then they came to London after that. We connected with them. I'd never met any Australians before. I had a low opinion of Australia because I'm a big cricket fan, and I was definitely Australia was the old enemy.
Yes.
And then I met all these really cool people with pink hair and kind of punk circus from Australia, although they were more B-52s punk than Sid Vicious for sure. And I fell in love with one of the trapeze artists, which obviously had an effect on me. She ended up staying in London to work with the theatre group, the feminist theatre group Cunning Stunts,
Oh, God, Colin Stunts.
and
What was her
who were
name?
all. Her name was Sue Broadway and still is, but she wasn't a big time member of Cunning Stunts. But, we, as Furious Pig, we were very familiar with Cunning Stunts and we knew several of them quite well. We moved in the same circles, they lived next door to Scritti Politti, who on Carroll Street in Camden, which was just up the road from where we were living as Furious Pig. So it was like there are so many kind of intertwined. It was a very vibrant time. I think we can.
So did you know a woman called Jan Dungy who was
absolutely?
So she was from Bungie.
Yeah, I absolutely I adored Jan, and she was someone I met, in that. When we came to London, I may even have met her before actually, because they came down and did work in Devon. There was a festival called Hood Fair in South Devon, in the area where I grew up, and I remember being there with the Cunning Stunts people and Furious Pig people,
Yes, well, that was quite interesting because, so did you come across the East Anglian fairs or did you brush against them? There was like the Balsham fairs and Albion fairs, because the Hood Fair was probably something quite similar in another part of the country.
Probably, I'm not sure I did. Later, when I was really in my new circus phase after coming back from Australia, again with Sue Broadway, we worked together a lot. We had a group called Rara Zoo, who was, like a 4-person circus act that played a 2-hour show all over England and all over the world. We toured all over the world. And we came to premises a bunch, and we also went out into the woods near Bungie in there to do various seasonal events.
Did you ever know a woman called Tarby Davenport then? And she used to put a lot of events on. She was in
the name. The name is familiar. I'm not sure.
Tarby. There was a place called Oaksmere, and there was a lot of circus things that used to happen there. There was various people. Actually, the person I once contacted about Cunning Stunts was, what's her name? Sally Davis, I think.
Sally Davis?
Yes. Did you know her?
See that. Yeah, I would call her a good friend. We played together in a band called the Fallout Marching Band, which was an anti-nuclear brass band that played in all those kind of activist politics of the early 80s. And I knew Sally, yes. She was also in Cunning Stunts, yes.
Yes.
And actually, she visited me here a few years ago out of the blue. It was really nice to see her.
Oh, delightful, yes. Years. I know. There was, yes, I've tracked down quite a few theatre people who had done performances in East Anglia, which I don't know. Now I can't quite remember without looking at the previous interviews I've done. But
Oaksmere sounds familiar also to me. It's possible that, I can't drag out of my memory every single connection I've made. I've lived in so many different parts of the world, but we're talking my roots for sure.
Right, that's really, yes, God, that's amazing. Because there was another person called Ursula Plank, who, she was in the Third Ear band, but she came to East Anglia and would play fiddle, but then she became part of the Norwich Orchestra as well, and they got kind of involved in lots of alternative stuff, which was just, oh God, I have to send you something that a guy sent me. It was a lot about rituals. People loved doing rituals at that stage, and you mentioned Full Moon, and it was people got their djembe drums out, and suddenly, they were, spiritual appropriation was right there, because it was like, oh, we'll do sweat lodges, we'll get onto ley lines, we'll do certain circles. North American Indian, let's smudge you for smudge's sake. I mean, it was just extraordinary. But I mean, at the time, it all seemed like a good thing to do, really,
It's interesting. I think, for me, I've always been aware of the difficulty or the difficulty of avoiding being accused of cultural appropriation. in all kinds of ways. And, I should put my hand up and say that really, in terms of the didgeridoo coming into Europe, I was really the first person to open that door. When I lived and worked in Australia with Circus Oz, I ended up leaving the group because they were moving in a big commercial direction and going to go to the Los Angeles Olympic Festival in whatever, it must have been 83, or I don't know when the Olympics go. But I said, I'm not going to do that. I want to go bush in Australia, and with a friend travelled through central Australia and up into the Northern Territory in a beaten up old station wagon. And we visited, because he had access to Aboriginal communities, we visited numbers of Aboriginal communities where otherwise, without a permit to go, you wouldn't be allowed. And really, I was just interested in learning more about those people, because Circus Oz was very supportive of Aboriginal Indigenous rights. And I felt very much in line with that. And rather than going into the big showbiz world at that time, it felt more appropriate to me to make that journey into Indigenous culture in Australia, where I was quickly found that I was a meaningless little nothing in terms of their communities. It's like these people have been in those places, in that place for, well, now it's known they've been there at least 65,000 years. That's only relatively recently come through. And just to have somebody who comes in who's some little bloody white fella who thinks he's somebody because he's in a circus, and who gives a shit about that. I got up there and I quickly found that, there was a bigger world encapsulated in the connection to be found in Indigenous Australian culture than I had ever really understood.
Yes.
And I ended up asking permission to play the didgeridoo, because I didn't want to be that white guy who was taking something without having a clue about what they were doing and putting themselves out into the world with that. I didn't know at the time that I was going to put myself out into the world as a didgeridoo player, but
no, quite.
That evolved over the period after, in the mid-80s, once I come back to Europe. But it was very important to me to go and talk to elders and ask them what they felt about that, if I was able to do that with integrity.
Yes.
And so I suppose, you're talking about that time in the kind of new age woo-woo culture that had come out of the 70s, and Europeans going and becoming influenced by all kinds of spiritual indigenous cultures around the world. And I've always had I'd say personally, a difficult relationship with a lot of that, because I see people as not, I just don't know where their integrity is always on these questions, especially when it becomes monetized.
Yes. Well, it's yes. I guess a lot of people then, I found, started setting themselves up as some sort of think, I could run weekend workshops. I could identify as this person, and then I'll get some followers, and this was going to be my path. But there was kind of definitely money involved.
There was over there then, and there is here. I mean, I live in California, so it's not something you can be here and be blind to all of that, from the kirtan wallahs to the Native American flutes as sacred ceremony people, to all kinds of aspects of that culture, which, it's a difficult path to walk and be conscious and be able to say that you are really being respectful of the origins of these cultures, and even to have the knowledge. It's like people have told me that I'm a shaman. I would never, ever say that. It's not something that people who are would say.
No.
And I've not had that kind of a training or path myself. I played the didgeridoo, and I brought it out of Australia on the understanding that I would play the didgeridoo in a contemporary way with respect to where it comes from, and not attempt to imitate or play indigenous music on it, and also to positively spread the word about the indigenous people from whom the didgeridoo originates. And so I've tried, in the 40 plus years I've been working globally with the didgeridoo, to tread that line very, very clearly.
Yes, absolutely.
And so I think I can pretty safely say that I was, if not the very first person to be working with didgeridoo and contemporary music in Europe and the Northern Hemisphere, one of the first people who came out with it in that time, in the early mid-80s.
Yes, that was you were an early adopter. But then, so just going back to, well, keeping in the 80s. So yes, 80, 86. Yes, it was kind of a weird time because we had the Red Wedge movement started to appear. So there was that kind of movement. And then there was, obviously, there'd been Rock Against Racism. Then Chernobyl had happened and things were getting a bit sort of worried. People started to, because a lot of people had swapped from coffee to barley cup, but then they found that barley cup was made in Poland that had been contaminated. So they went, oh, forget the barley cup. Well, let's get back to coffee.
I've forgotten that.
And then, so then 87 came along, and again, there was a bit of a shift because, there had been a lot of dope smoking, but then ecstasy came along, which started to influence a lot of people. And the music scene that, this was my kind of decade, I suppose, in a certain way. I could see a lot of bands were going from indie pop like the Smiths to suddenly getting into a bit more dance music. And then 87 was when you formed your next band, wasn't it? The Lights in a Fat City.
Yes. Well, we actually had formed about we got together, we started playing together in 1985, 84. But we recorded our first album in 1987 on the back of being booked to play at WOMAD in Cornwall earlier that summer. And that was an important step for us to come out. In fact, we weren't called Lights in a Fat City. We were billed at WOMAD as Lights in a Fat City because they got a hold of a copy of the cassette that we made from our performances at busking in Camden Lock.
Right.
And we had given it some other name, but we called the cassette Lights in a Fat City. So WOMAD got hold of that and they said, okay, this is Lights in a Fat City and we want you playing here. So we said, well, we can't argue with the fact that the promotion of this name is out there. So we became Lights in a Fat City.
Yes. And did you quickly find yourself an audience at this stage?
Yeah, it was interesting because there was nobody making that kind of music, which was really effectively bringing indigenous musical sounds. In the case of Lights in a Fat City, it was the didgeridoo with all kinds of percussion and drums, mostly hand drums, with sonic mixing that created an ambient and different kind of atmospheres created from the sounds of the percussion, especially that we were using through electronic filters. But we did an extraordinary amount of work in Europe and later in Canada and the US, playing jazz festivals, new music festivals, WOMAD, as I said. We played folk festivals.
Right,
we were playing the Leipzig Jazz Festival, headlining opening the whole festival in October 1989, right as the big demonstrations which resulted in the fall of the Berlin Wall began. And so when we went to Leipzig, we went into this hotbed of thousands upon thousands of people demonstrating with this. Leipzig at the time, for those who don't know, was in East Germany. So it meant to get there you had to go through all the checkpoints, and we didn't go through checkpoint Charlie. We went through another checkpoint because we'd come from a different angle. But to get to Leipzig was like going into we went through the Berlin Wall, through that, to get to Leipzig. And there we found this city which was absolutely hopping with intense energy that was so unlike anywhere else that we'd been in Europe at that time. And
God, that must have been very alive.
Oh, it was extraordinary. And it was the East German mark was the currency. We got paid what seemed like an unimaginable amount of money to do this gig, but it was all useless once it got to the West. So we basically threw it around, giving it to hotel workers and waiters and people who became helpful to us in the short time we were there, because we had no idea that within a month that the Berlin Wall would have fallen, and within a few months the East German mark and the West German mark would be have parity between them. So it was just this wild moment in history, and we were there partly because in 1988, on the bicentennial anniversary of the founding of Australia, we had welcomed through Gatwick Airport an Aboriginal elder who came to make a protest in England on the White Cliffs of Dover. His name was Burnham, and he came with a couple of other people to claim Australia, to claim Britain for the Australian Aborigines at dawn on the date of the bicentennial anniversary of the time when Britain had claimed Australia for the British King. And he did that on the White Cliffs of Dover at dawn with us playing with him. And he made this audacious speech which was a spoof on the speech which the British Captain James Phillip, his last name was Phillip, who had been the one who officially claimed Australia, or New South Wales, for the British King. Burnham made this speech that was about tyranny and about claiming your rights over tyranny. And the Germans in Leipzig heard about that event because it was blasted all over the Western media. You can still find online, you can find photos of this occasion on Time magazine, and it was in the front page of The Guardian. I remember a photo of Burnham. But they heard of us playing with Burnham and invited us to come to Leipzig, and made a German translation of Burnham's speech. Was the first action of the Leipzig Jazz Festival of 1989, where the director stood up and made this pronouncement, a translation of Burnham's speech. I can send you a copy of the speech.
Well, yes. God, that would be amazing.
But not in German. But anyway, that was the thing that we came in after the reading of this speech, and the crowd went absolutely nuts. So it was like Lights in a Fat City found ourselves in a moment in time which I think was quite unique.
Well, yes.
And we were able to, because it was also unique because there wasn't really a culture of people from that, it was obviously going to happen, where people from the Caucasian Western cultures had really adopted the sounds and qualities of music that many other parts of the world had, where it was mostly, prior to that, it was mostly considered ethnic music of one kind or another.
Yes.
What we were doing was something which was taking those influences, and in the case of the didgeridoo especially, those instruments, and putting it into a musical context which was new, and it had its roots we weren't trying to imitate indigenous music at all. We were making our own direction. And so we were in a great moment before the Virgin Records bins had African music and New Age, whatever, the different categories that became marketing strategies for music from the late 80s to 90s on. We were doing something which could go in almost any musical setting. And yeah, we played a lot. Long story.
But it's interesting because Joe Boyd's just written a very big book, hasn't he, about kind of roughly world music. And he brings that kind of one of those many points in the book about when record shops started to have a world music section. And he said, well, the good thing is that if you were just curious, you knew, well, that's the section that you needed to go to. Okay, it's not great, but it's a start. And I kind of... Yeah. I mean, there's no point being picky, I guess. I mean, in his opinion, and I guess with mine, it's like, well, it would just make it easy for the consumer. Because I was, that John Peel period of the 80s and the next decade, but especially the 80s. I mean, I got fascinated with all those bands that he played, like the Bundu Boys or Gregory Isaacs or, Thomas McFumo and the Blacks and Bulgarian folk music. I mean, it was just it did seem like a very exciting time, as well as the indie pop and the early rap music for Public Enemy and people like that. So it was it just felt very like, wow, this is amazing. I went to see the Bundu Boys in Norwich at one of those little venues, and it was absolutely packed. There was a a moment where, there was record labels like Stearns, wasn't there, that was very good, and Earthworks Records. And then there was obviously Green Sleeves and various other Trojan records as well for reggae. But it just always felt like very expansive, actually. So one was always, as a person, you just always wanted to be on that next little, oh my God, have you heard this? And getting very excited by a new sound, really.
I was, I inherited that enthusiasm when I came here to the San Francisco area in 91 at the end of the Lights in a Fat City tour, where I once again I jumped ship, I suppose, because I found myself in California, in this part of California, and loving it particularly. And I ended up for 26 of the years that I've been here running a radio show, doing a weekly radio show playing. It was called Music of the World, which wasn't the title. I wouldn't have chosen that title. Who knows what I would have chosen, but myself and 4 other people did that show every weekday morning on a prominent public radio station here. And it was so amazing to do that for me. It was what a gift to have, to be able to explore the music of the world. And I tried to make my shows as much related to the title of the show, Music of the World. So I didn't run down one particular path or go into one culture in particular, but I did play a lot of indigenous music. That had always been an interest of mine.
Yes.
And music from all over. I mean, it's just been such a great experience. I'm not doing that anymore, but I loved it for so long.
It's funny because there was a band who had a communal house in the 70s. I think it was the Global Village Trucking Company, and one of the members.
I remember the name, yeah.
One of the members, bizarrely, was I think the 19th in line of the throne. There'd been something very bizarre. I had to find his name actually, because you might go, oh, I know him. He also does a kind of bit of global radio shows, Global Village Trucking Company, and you go, oh, him, I know, band. I'll tell you who it is, because then it was just like, oh, it is. James Lascelles is his name. But he's kind of, again, a bit like you, just stuck with playing sort of music, but then he's gone in from jazz to then kind of much more kind of world music, collaborating with lots of different artists from around the globe. So there you go. But going back to your band, though, and the late 80s, so you brought out one album called Somewhere. Then in 1991, you go to America and you decide you're going to stay. But then you bring out a second album, don't you? Sound Column at this
Sound
stage.
Column, which then was remastered and had some a couple of tracks added to it, and came out as Memory Ground in '99. But it's basically the same album. Sound Column we recorded in San Francisco within a couple of weeks of arriving here. There's a place here called the Palace of Fine Arts, which was built in the early 1900s for a world fair that happened in San Francisco. And there's a rotunda as part of that building, which was also for a long time that building was the home of an organization called the Exploratorium, which is kind of like a fabulous science expo museum, hands-on, where kids and adults can go and find out about all kinds of ways of making cool machines and demonstrations of fabulous science.
Yes.
It's like a hands-on science museum run by a bunch of geeks who are totally into exploring and exposing different elements of the scientific world. Inside one of the pillars of this rotunda outside, which are about 70, 80 feet tall, probably, was one, it was the Sound Column, which was, you entered through a door and you could go inside. It's like being in a little cell, probably about 15 feet long and not rectangular, but, small. And inside it are these various notes that have been written, the sound waves of which had been marked on the wall. And they coincided with 3 of the didgeridoos that I had with me. And so we ended up going in there and recording a very, very ambient album worth of music. It was an experience that we had within a couple of weeks of arriving in San Francisco.
Right.
And that's what the Sound Column is. It's the recording of us playing live in this extremely resonant reverb chamber, really.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so you sort of started to do your solo work and career during the 90s, and then work with people like the Kronos Quartet as well?
Kronos. You know what? I didn't really work with Kronos. I proposed that they should make a piece for didgeridoo and string quartet, and having been told that there was no repertoire, I should write it myself. I had a rehearsal with them with a kind of the bones of a piece that I was working on for that idea, and they said to me, we had a rehearsal, and they said, we think it's a very good idea, but we should ask someone who already writes for string quartet to do it. And I was embarrassed and kind of ran away with my tail between my legs. But 15 years later, I got a call from a director of a new music festival in San Francisco asking me if I would do the world premiere of a piece for didgeridoo and string quartet by an Australian composer, Peter Sculthorpe. And I said, wow, absolutely, I'd love to. It's my dream. And so they flew him in from Australia. By that time, he was in his mid-80s, and this was his 16th string quartet, based on themes about the story. It's a long story, but to cut it short, after 2001 attacks on Afghanistan in response to 9/11, many thousands of people made their way on boats from Afghanistan to Australia, where they were not well received, and they were put in essentially concentration camps, and where they languished. And Peter Sculthorpe heard of this story because it wasn't public. And
Yes.
he wrote a piece of music inspired by the plight of those people in the boat people in Australian deserts who had been separated from their families and hidden away from anything. So that was the piece. And when they flew him in for the festival, and I was working with not the Kronos, but another San Francisco quartet, the Del Sol Quartet. And I asked Peter Sculthorpe what gave him the concept or the idea to work with Didjeridu and string quartet. And he said, oh, well, about 15 years ago, Kronos came to me and they made a suggestion and maybe I should write for Didgeridoo and string quartet. And so it came all the way back to me after 15 years. I hadn't really given it a lot of thought. I'd been very busy in between.
Yes.
And since then, not frequently, but I did a lot of work with playing the work of Peter Sculthorpe, and I continue to do so. I've just got a commission to go to the New England in January to work with another orchestra, and last year I worked with an orchestra in Utah, and I've been working with 2 different string quartets playing the music of Peter Sculthorpe, who passed away 10 years ago. But I also recorded all his works for Didgeridoo and string quartet.
Amazing.
It's been a really great story, and I'm through my classical upbringing and my horn playing as a teen and into my early 20s, I had a pretty intensive classical music training, so I've been able to bring my knowledge of that into my performances with the didgeridoo in this new classical music. It's something I love to do.
Oh, I'm not surprised. That's a fascinating project. But then, yes, during the 90s, you formed Trance Mission, didn't you?
Yes.
So did you capture that kind of zeitgeist period of, slightly, I was going to say, trance music and techno and slightly ambient and I mean, did you, there was all those bands, was it Planet Dog and all these clubs, and there was Australasia?
I played with Lights in a Fat City. We played Club Dog and with a whirly gig and those gigs in London.
The whirly
before we
gig.
left.
God, friends used to love the whirly
gig.
Yes.
And DJ Monkey Pilot. He put on whirly gig. I wonder where he is now. And we played at Glastonbury. But the Transmission wasn't really named for that kind of trance. It's interesting because, of course, it's been, if you dial in Transmission on YouTube or on Spotify, any number of Transmission events come up, and they're mostly to do with electronica and dance music. Transmission we named it that because we were living in the Mission District of San Francisco, and what we did was kind of trancey, but in a more acoustic way than you might otherwise expect. But we started that project in 1992 and then began recording. We made 4 albums in the 90s.
Yes.
But they're hard to find. Hopefully we're going to make that more easy for them to be out in the world. But you can find the whole albums on YouTube. The 3 albums we made, and the 3 studio albums and 1 live. And then we made it right before the COVID lockdowns happened. We released our 5th album, which can be found on all the platforms. It's called Le Pendu.
Oh, Pendu, right. That came out in 2020, didn't it?
Yeah, it came back and it promptly disappeared because nobody.
Do you have all the master tapes for that? Do you have them all nicely filed?
We're funnily enough in a conversation about who's going to keep the master tapes now, because we all live in different places and have different kinds of lifestyles. So, yes, is the short answer.
Right. And what happened to Beth Cluster? She
and I still do work together here and there as a duo. Although she and I were the ones who started that project. And she's still here in San Francisco and working on film scores mostly. But she has another band, a cool band called Russian Telegraph.
Right.
which are two areas of two hills in San Francisco, Russian Hill and Telegraph Hill.
Yes, my God, there's a sort of, so your 90s was very focused in California and sort of that project. Did you tour much with that transmission?
Yeah, and we did several tours in Europe. We never came to England or Britain. I've been very infrequent in my ability to get work in Britain in the past 30 years. It's almost an embarrassment, where I've played a lot in Germany and in France and the Netherlands and Belgium and Hungary and Italy and all over. But, I don't know if you remember Henry Cow.
Yes, Henry Cow. That was there was a guy called Nick who was in the Shrubs who, can you remember him? He managed Henry Cow in the 70s.
Oh, Nick Hobbs.
Yes,
Nick Hobbs.
Who's now in Turkey.
I remember Nick. Well, I was just naming Henry Cow because we're a London-based outfit, but I don't think they ever played in the UK. They played back in the day when they were playing in the 70s. They pretty much played in Europe and in Eastern Europe, and they rarely, if ever, got to perform in the UK. And I sometimes, actually, one of my Furious Pig co-Furious Pigs, Dom Weeks,
yes,
lives with Tim Hodgkinson in the house with Tim Hodgkinson in South London, Tim Hodgkinson of Henry Cow. But anyway, yes, no, it's an embarrassment to me. I did one tour in the UK. It's been almost 20 years pretty much ago, where I toured with a group of Tuvan throat singers.
Right.
And I was working with them. They're called Chirgilchin. And the didgeridoo goes so well with that kind of music. And we had been working a bunch touring in the USA together. And we had a tour of basically southern England and Wales. But it's been a long time.
It has been.
The last time I recall, I did do a solo tour about 2018, I think.
Right.
But it's hard to,
There's
it's
a lot.
not easy to be a global traveler with music as much as it used to be.
No, I know everyone's would love it, but it's a lot of work, a lot of admin.
Yeah.
And actually, I think for British bands going to America, they just like, we can't actually afford to lose that much money. We're not going to make any, but we can't afford to lose it because we're not that wealthy.
That's the thing. It's a very difficult time for independent music, I would say. And even, in this country, without going too far into it, but for a long time, it's been hard for even well-known artists from different parts of the world to get good work in the United States and get visas to come.
Yes, it's a tricky one. Yes, and I mean, unfortunately, a lot of the British bands relied on doing their European month, whizzing around the whole sort of place, in all the different countries, and just thinking, let's just book the van, book the PA and the engineer, and let's just sell the merch, and let's go to Germany and sell some products, and then keep ourselves going for the next 11 months. But that little circuit's kind of become too difficult, really, I think.
It's really, we live in very challenging times, and even in San Francisco, which was, I don't live in San Francisco. I live, for the longest time when I've been here, I live in what's known as the East Bay, across the bay from San Francisco. But still, it's only 40 minutes from here to downtown San Francisco. But in the time between COVID and now, when I came back 2 years ago from being on my sabbatical, if you like, a whole lot of the music venues in this area have either closed down or just gone DJ, and it's like harder and harder to find the scene and where are good places to play. And yes, there are places in this area, but it's tricky for everybody.
Yes, that's a bit of a shame. So look, just that. So the O years then. So Transmission was the 90s. So how did you navigate your O years at this stage?
How did I navigate what?
the that's not a sexy term, is it? The 90s, the next decade,
Oh,
the O years. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
All the
I
noughties,
did.
but I thought that was a bit of a naff
I don't
term.
like the noughties.
No.
I'd say the early 2000s.
Yes.
It was tricky because there was, back in the 90s until the end of the 90s and even at the beginning of the O years, that you could make some money with CD sales.
Yes.
But then it's been dwindling ever since. And that's been tricky. Yes, I admit it. It's been a difficult period of time as an independent musician playing something which is an unusual instrument, especially. I mean, I still play guitar, I still play all these other instruments, but the didgeridoo has been my kind of main artery for a long time. I was fortunate to get gigs playing with. I toured in Europe with a group called Mega Drums, which was kind of like a super world percussion group with Ayeto Moreira and Zakir Hussain and Leonard Eto, who was one of the early artistic directors of the Kodo group from Japan, and Glenn Velez, who's a phenomenal frame drum player from the USA. And they got me in as a didgeridoo player for a big tour we did in Europe. Oh, that was 2000, I think.
Right.
I've kept busy, but I have not been as effective at getting out into the world as I used to be. And I had several group projects. There was one called Baraka Moon, which was based in Sufi, basically Sufi dance music, for Qawwali music, but with didgeridoo and guitar and drum set.
Is that was that Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan who? No, that wasn't. That was a different music.
No, but the singer was Sukawat Ali Khan.
Right.
He was not a relation of Nusrat, but his father, Salamat Ali Khan, was a teacher of Nusrat. It's all, the Indian Pakistani world is intertwined somewhere there.
Yes.
Ali Khan, I'm not saying it's like Smith or Jones in Pakistan, but I think there are many Ali Khans.
I would imagine. Yes, this is...
But, I've done several more solo album projects, and I've continued to work with the didgeridoo. I just, a couple of years ago, came out with a duo project that's actually all didgeridoo, but it was directed by a friend of mine, and V of the U. She and I were in Maui together when the big wildfires happened there, which destroyed the town of Lahaina and the whole community. And
is that where Mick Fleetwood lived?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, and he had his club in Lahaina. It was completely destroyed in that part of Lahaina.
So why did you skip California for a different? Did you just want to escape COVID?
No. In 2020, this part of the West Coast really blew up around this time of year, and not only was COVID happening and everyone was shut in their homes, but there were wildfires that spread on a gigantic level in this area and much further north, coming all the way down the West Coast. And we got tired of being of choking on the awful air. I mean, the air quality was really intense.
Yes.
With smoke, and not just for a week, but for months on end. And, it was kind of like, well, what's happening? We're not working. We're just like prisoners of this moment in time, of this culture of COVID lockdown. Where should we go? Should we go east? Well, we'd have to get through a whole load of fires to go east of here. North, we knew, was not an option because we'd just come from there, being beaten back by huge wildfires. And we ended up getting on a plane to Maui, just spontaneously, without any... I had friends where we could go and stay for a month or so. We said, let's go Maui and see what that's like. And I ended up spending the next 3.5 years in Maui,
Right.
mostly.
Did you take lots of like didgeridoo and various other bits, or did?
I came back once because I had to move myself out of the place I was living in this area, and I came back and I took some. The first time I took two or three didgeridoos with me, very little, just 2 suitcases and what you could get on without doing more than one excess bag
Yes, wise
and
choice.
traveling light. And then I came back one time where I had to move everything, and I put most of what I owned into storage, and then I took back some more of my favorite instruments, because didgeridoo being essentially one note orchestra, I like to say.
Yes.
It helps to have a few of them to have different colors and different personalities in what you do. But I didn't end up performing in Maui while I was there. I was mostly just living and enjoying, one, the good air, and two, the beauty of living in an island culture, which, with the people, it was... And I wasn't very interested in making connections with the Maui New Age community, which is a big part of how people, I think, view the culture there from the outside. But there is a phenomenally vibrant multi-ethnic culture of Asian mixed with native Hawaiian people from Philippines and Japan and Korea and other parts of Asia. And, you're living in a different place in a different time. I ended up doing a lot of gardening, farming, and being part of a community garden where I met all these other people and learned all this on just a different kind of world, and eating food from the land, being in a tropical climate. It is paradise. And at that time on Maui and Hawaii, there was no tourism. So the beaches, the mountains, the places which normally are just thick with people who've come to get their yayas out for a week or two, and not there, and those places were just pristine. It was amazing, a beautiful opportunity. But after a while, and especially when the Maui fires happened in August, it was August the 8th, 2023, it became clear to me that this was going to be something which was going to take the island a long time to recover, and for many people whose livelihoods had been completely destroyed, especially those people who didn't have money or insurance or rented or whatever. They had already had to leave. A lot of those people who were of the have-nots had to escape that circumstance by leaving the island and going, in many cases, to the mainland. And I just couldn't see myself digging into... I had island fever to start with. I needed to be on a bigger landmass and able to go back into my world. So I came back to the mainland US two years ago.
Right.
And
And are you in a new place, or you come back to the...
I've come back. I'm not in the same place as I was. I'd like to change my perspective. So I'm in a very multi-ethnic area of the East Bay, which is not a kind of, it's a low-income area of people of all kinds. It's almost like farmland that has been gradually taken over by a more industrial reality here. But there are a lot of Latino people, quite a few black people. There's a very different culture from other parts of the Bay Area where I've lived before.
Yes. Oh.
And it's great. I like it, multi-ethnic qualities.
Yes.
I don't so much like the air quality here, so we'll see. I'm not sure how long I'm going to be right here. We shall see.
Well, absolutely. So your project's going forward then. You said you've got a collaboration, is it in New England at the end of this year?
Yeah, that's happening at the beginning of next year, and I'm looking to do some more. I'm also working with that's with an orchestra in New England, in Maine. I'm looking, that just came in for me. So I'm looking right now. I've been putting feelers out to do some more collaborative ventures, perhaps over in that area of the States during the early part of next year. But I'm also looking for solo gigs. I like to play solo because I kind of have almost a one-man band quality, since I play a whole lot of percussion and drum work while playing didgeridoo. And I'm in the early stages of working on some more dance-oriented musical tracks to play with. So we'll see how that goes.
Yes.
I'm going up to Oregon, which is the next state up the West Coast, for a festival in a few weeks, and that's going to be a solo event, but we shall see what I take with me. I'm kind of opening myself out to new directions within my own solo performances, and looking forward to meeting people along the way who I may do collaborations with. We shall see.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I'm sure everyone asks you this, but do you have a lot of didgeridoos in your studio?
I have a dozen or so. I've trimmed down from. I didn't. I know people who have 60, 70, 100 didgeridoos. I think it's insane. I've got probably about 14 or 15 perhaps in total, and of that, when I travel, I'll take 4 with me, or maybe 5 if I know that they're needed. And then I have a couple which are adjustable, so that they're not obviously traditional instruments, but they can play any note that I'm asked to play, which is useful. But I prefer the traditionally made eucalyptus hollowed out by termites instruments, because they're the ones that have the juice, the juju for me.
Right. Excellent. My God, that's amazing. Well, look, this has been fantastic. It's been quite mind-blowing, actually. My brain's gone all over the shop here.
Yeah, well, me too. It's been a delight to meet you. And
Yes.
I listened to some of your recorded parts of your shows, and of course the first one I plugged into, you were playing The Fall, and I'm just like, it's The Fall. I know it's The Fall. It was alive. I'm pretty sure it was a live recording of The Fall.
Right.
And 2 books I would like to read. One is that Joe Boyd book, which you mentioned especially, and now you told me about the Rough Trade one that I'm curious about. But the other one is by there's somebody wrote a book, a biography of Mark E. Smith, and I would be curious to read that for sure.
Well, yeah, the Joe Boyd one is an extraordinary publication. I mean, because he did White Bicycles, which is his 60s book. He said, well, people say, what about the 70s? And he said, well, I wasn't around. I wasn't on the scene in the 70s. And I think he spent 20 years writing this other book, which is quite a phenomenal big publication. But yes, he's done quite a few tours doing that book. But he's a fascinating character.
He's gone though. I mean, he passed on.
No, he's not dead.
Are you sure?
Yes. Joe Boyd.
Yes.
Well, I hope not.
Pretty sure I think he passed away a year or 2 ago.
No, not Joe, because I interviewed him last year. Let's all Google Joe. No, he's still very much with us. These
are the good things. I met.
He did a lot of stuff.
Born
yes,
in 1942. Why did I think he was gone?
So so he did a lot on Hannibal Records, didn't he?
Yes, I know. Well, that was the thing. He you talked about Dr. Didge, and you talked about, you didn't mention Outback, but Outback was the duo that Dr. Didge came out of. And anyway, Joe Boyd signed Outback, the duo, to Hannibal Records, and then they became part of Rykodisc.
Right.
And right at that time, Lights in a Fat City was negotiating a contract with Rykodisc, And then they said, we were practically going to sign a contract with them. And then they said, oh, we've just found we have another didgeridoo band. So we're going to have to cut our agreement at this point. And so they got Hannibal Records, and with it they got Outback and Dr. Didge. And that was a separation. It was a moment of great disappointment to me at the time, because I saw Rykodisc as being a great way forward for a distribution of a new project at that time. And it went away.
It's always so tricky.
Thank you for correcting me.
Yeah, I
don't know why I thought he passed away, but thank you.
You've cleared that one up. He's fine. Good. I've sent you his link to his website. So it's a brilliant book. And, when somebody who's obviously very interested in this stuff, you think, God, he must have done a lot of research on it. So, yes, it's quite fascinating.
I think so. He was a mine of information. I don't think I ever met him, but I knew a whole bunch. Simon Tassano, who was the third member of Lights in a Fat City, was Richard Thompson's forever sound person and worked with since the early 80s. And he knew Joe very well, of course.
Yes. God, what was his name?
Simon Tassano, Tassano.
Right, my God. Lights, did you say he was in Lights in a Fat City?
Yes. He was the sound element in the
Oh, I got you.
And we worked together on co-producing a lot of the Transmission albums and a lot of my work too.
Oh, interesting. Right.
Yeah.
I've got you. Right, look, I'll let you go because that's your morning.
Go. It's really great to see you and meet you.
Yes, I know, we're all in dark. Well, I'm in darkness here, aren't I? Sorry about that. I forgot it's
dark. Still sunny. It's 2:00 in the afternoon.
This is
true. Thank you for having me.
Yes, well, thank you. And I'll keep in touch. I'll send you a link
Please do.
And all the best for the year.
Thank you. You too.
Okay, take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye. And that was me in conversation with Stephen Kent, talking about his life in music. This has been the C86 show, David Eastaugh. Have a great week. Stay safe.